So since it's been a little bit of time since we've gone over solving, we are going to refresh our memory of the 4 different ways we've already learned on how to solve. Okay, the first way was solve by graphic. Again, I think this is the easiest way to solve, and you can use this method. You really can use it always, but really when these zeros are whole numbers. So we're on page 8 of our notes, guys. When the zeros are whole numbers. Do we remember what zeros means? Do we remember our 4-letter acronym? That's on the board. R-O-X-S, rocks, roots, zeros, x-intercepts, and solutions all mean the same thing, and that is where it hits the x-axis. So whenever we are solving our quadratics, whenever we are finding our zeros, we're looking for x-intercepts. So looking at this graph, how many times does it hit the x-axis? Twice. Headphones are away for everybody, correct? Okay, what's this ordered pair? Bless you, bless you. What's the left ordered pair, guys? -3, 0. And what's the right one? 2, 0. What's the maximum number of solutions you can have? 2. Again, that's, in my opinion, the easiest way. Okay? Okay, next, solve by factoring. You can solve by factoring when you can factor. You can't solve by factoring if the problem doesn't factor. Okay, so remember when you're solving by factoring, it needs to be in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Is it already in that form? So what's my a? 1. Very good. What's my b? 5. And what's my c? 6. So we are going to draw our x over to the side. And what goes on top of our x? A times c, so 1 times 6 is 6. What goes on bottom? B, which is 5. So then we need factors of 6 that add up to 5. Remember, we can go to our calculator. My calculator's restarting. Go to y equals, and you can do 6 divided by x. That's how you can pull up your factors. And we're looking for 2 numbers that add together to give you 5. 1 and 6 give you 7. 2 and 3 give you 5. So 2 and 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. So now we're going to draw our 2 by 2 box. Remember, first term goes in the first box. Last term goes in the last box. And then the 2 numbers we found in our x go in our box with x's. Then we're going to take out our GCF. What do both of these have? 2 and 6 are both divisible by. But these have a x, and 3 and 6 are both divisible by 3. Remember to check yourself. X squared. X times 2, 2x. X times 3, 3x. 2 times 3 is 6, so we factored correctly. So it's x plus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. The reason I'm making them pluses is because the 3 and the 2 are both positive. What do we do next? My goal when solving is to find the values of x, so now I should probably solve for x. What do I do here to solve for x? Minus 3 on both sides. And I get x equals negative 3. What do I do here? Minus 2, and we get x equals negative 2. Remember, that is a correct way to write your solutions. You can just tell me the two x values. Could I have solved this one by graphing? Yeah, because what did we say? Solve by graphing when the zeros are whole numbers. Are both these whole numbers? Yeah, so I could have done this one by graphing, okay? So again, there's more than one way you can solve these problems, okay? It's going to be a lot of picking your favorite method, and that's what you can use. Next, the square root method. The square root method is pretty specific on when you can use it. You only can use when there is no bx term. Do we remember that? You have an x squared term and you have a constant. There's no bx term. So looking here, there is no x squared term. Sorry, there's no bx term. When you're solving using the square root method, you want the x squared by itself. Is my x squared all alone? Yeah, it says x squared equals 16. What undoes a square? Square root. So I'm going to square root both sides. A square root and a square undo each other, so I get x equals. Do we remember what we have to put out in front when we do a square root? Plus minus. Good job. And what's the square root of 16? 4. How many solutions is this? 2. It's positive 4 and negative 4. Okay? Do we like this method? Do we remember that this was like our favorite method we've learned? Okay? And again, this is an acceptable way to write your solutions. Okay? Then the fourth and final method that we've learned is solving by completing the square. So we're going to use this always, but a has to equal 1. And if it doesn't equal 1, you have to make it equal 1. A must equal 1. Does anybody remember the one thing I told you you have to remember about completing the square? What's the one thing we have to remember about completing the square? Because again, my guess is none of y'all are going to actually use this method to solve. Okay? But does anybody remember the one thing you have to know how to do? Find the magic number. Very good. Okay, so this one's the one where we have the magic number. We set it up where your x squared and your x term are on the left and the constant is on the right. Is it already set up like that? My x's are on the left, constant on the right. We're going to add that little plus blank for our magic number on both sides. I don't have to move anything around, but we need to add our plus blank for our magic number, right, Yusra? Okay, so we're going to find our magic number. Does anybody remember how to find the magic number? B, which is 6 over 2 squared. What's 6 divided by 2? Squared. 9. Now the reason we do like this method is now this is easy to factor. It's a perfect square trinomial, so I know it's going to be parentheses squared. What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 9? 3. And is it a plus or minus? Plus equals, what's negative 3 plus 9? 6. Again, you don't have to remember how to do any of this other than finding this magic number, b over 2 squared. Okay, you don't have to use this method. What undoes a square? Square root, both sides. My square root and my square cancel each other out, so I'm left with x plus 3 equals. What do you have to put out in front? Plus minus square root of 6. I want x by itself. What are we going to do to get x alone? Subtract 3. So I get x equals, can I actually combine these two? No, because the negative 3 is a whole number, the 6 is under the radical. So negative 3 plus minus the square root of 6. There we go. Good? Even if you don't fully remember all these methods, does this kind of jog our memory a little bit? What we did the week before spring break? Okay, again, can you use your calculator for all of these? Yes. Okay, so today we're going to learn the third and final way. The quadratic formula. This is your quadratic formula. Does this look long and messy? Yes, but I will tell you, if you can substitute values into the quadratic formula, or if you can substitute values into a formula, the quadratic formula is actually pretty easy, because does your calculator put a big fraction bar in the calculator? Can you do a fraction bar in the calculator? So if you can substitute values into a formula correctly, you can literally just type it in your calculator and get the correct answer. Okay, so it's not that bad. Y'all want to hear a fun song for the quadratic formula? Yes? No? So the quadratic formula goes to Pop Goes the Weasel / Jack in the Box song. I would sing it for you, but I think I've told y'all before, I was told to lip sing in my choir, so y'all don't want to hear me sing it. I think I sound great, and I think I'm singing to Pop Goes the Weasel, and I'm not. So we're going to listen. Good morning, Igor. Let's see if this one's a good one. We're going to listen to somebody who's hopefully better than me, but we can't hear it. Okay, let's start it over.
The quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Do you see why you don't want me to sing that? I can't sing. Okay, now you might think, okay, that's stupid. Why would you want a song to remember this formula? Are you going to be given this formula? Yes, it's on your formula chart. Okay, on your test you will have it, on your STAR test you will have it, but I will tell you that it's a lot easier if you don't have to keep going back and forth and you just know what it is. Okay, but you don't have to memorize it. But if you're a person who likes music and you hear things musically, if you listen to it, maybe it will help you remember it. Okay, we're going to skip the quadratic formula part and we're going to actually go to the quadratic formula solving page. So again, the reason I saved this one for the end is there's no restrictions whatsoever on when you can use this. You can use it if you have whole numbers, if you have decimals, if you have fractions, if A is 1, if A is not 1. It does not matter, okay? So that's why we like the quadratic formula. We don't like the quadratic formula just because it's long and messy, okay? So for any quadratic equation in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, the quadratic formula may be used to find the solutions. Miss Humanic, did y'all hear that? Miss Humanic was just singing it. She has a little bit better voice than I do. And there's two different ways we're going to write our answers here. One is we're just going to type it in the calculator. It's going to be an ugly long decimal that we're going to round, and one we're going to simplify our radicals, which we have already simplified radicals some. Okay? So, when you're using the quadratic formula, you need to make sure your quadratic is in standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Is it in the correct form? What's my a? Remember, when we list out our a, b, and c, we are not using the variables, just the coefficients, just the numbers. What's my b? -3. Yusra. What's my c? -7. So, anywhere I see a b, I'm going to replace with -3. Anywhere I see an a, I'm going to replace with 2. And anywhere I see a c, I'm going to replace with -7. Biggest mistakes, guys. There's 2. And they both involve the b. This is -b. So the negative is there because that's part of the formula. Then you have your b. If your b is negative, do you need to put a negative? Yes, the negative is part of the formula, but if b is negative, you're going to have a negative. Okay? Then here, when you do your b squared, you have to use parentheses, because if you don't, when you square a negative without parentheses, you're going to get a negative number. Okay? But all numbers squared should be positive. Anytime you square a number, it should always be positive. So you must make sure whatever you substitute in for b, you put in parentheses, okay? Notice here, I have parentheses for all of the values I'm going to substitute in, right? It'd be a good idea, anytime you're substituting in the quadratic formula, use parentheses, okay? So, x equals negative, what's b? -3. Notice how, again, I put a negative there because b is negative. Plus or minus the square root of b. What's b? Squared minus 4a c times 2 over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay? I'm not going to do I don't necessarily like the way that. Okay, we'll follow it. Simplify the discriminant. The discriminant, this is the portion under the radical, under the square root. Oh, no, can't see that. Portion under the radical. So that's your b squared minus 4ac. That is your discriminant. Okay. Now, the discriminant does help you figure out stuff. Because sometimes it might just ask, is there one solution, 2 solutions, or no real solutions? You don't have to solve the whole entire problem to figure out if there's 1 solution, 2 solutions, or no real solutions. You can just use the discriminant. If the discriminant is positive, then you have 2 real solutions. If the discriminant is 0, you have one real solution. And if the discriminant is negative, then you have no real solutions. Now let's talk a little bit about why this is the case. Your discriminant's under the radical sign, and in front of the radical sign you have that plus minus. Let's say the discriminant is a positive 4. Okay, what's the square root of 4? 2. So if you add 2 to a number, you get something. And if you subtract 2 from something, you get a different number, right? So I would give you 2 different answers. If the discriminant is 0, what's the square root of 0? 0. If you add 0, and if you subtract 0, do you get 2 different numbers? No, you're only getting one answer. That's why it's only one solution. If your discriminant is negative, can you take the square root of a negative number? No, we talked about that a little bit before spring break. You cannot take the square root of a negative. So if the discriminant is negative, that's why you have no real solutions, because you can't take the square root of a negative. Okay? So it says simplify the discriminant. Again, that's the portion under the radical. So that's your negative 3 squared minus 4ac. I just took what's under the radical and put it here. You can type this now in the calculator exactly as you see it. So let's go to our calculator. Parentheses, make sure you include the parentheses. If you don't, you're going to get the wrong answer half of the time. Anytime b is negative, you will get the wrong answer if you don't use the parentheses. So negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. Did you type that in the calculator, Leo? Again, guys, I'm trying to show you how a lot of this unit can be done on the calculator. Make sure you're utilizing your calculator, please. And what do we get? Is that positive, negative, or 0? That's a positive, meaning we should have how many solutions here? 2. Okay? So we get positive 65. Okay? Now, what's a negative 3? Positive 3. So I'm just going to put 3 out in front, because I don't need the negative. That becomes just a positive 3. Plus or minus, we simplified the radical part. What do we get? 65. That's the discriminant. Remember, your discriminant is what's under the radical. All over, what's 2 times 2? 4. So 4 is my denominator. Are we okay with how we went from here to here? Simplify the radical. So instead of that messy thing under the radical sign, I just have 65. The negative 3 becomes a positive 3. 2 times 2 becomes 4. We good? Okay, so this is now where we have to separate it. Okay? What's this plus minus mean? So you're going to add it, but you're also then going to subtract it. So we're going to separate it into 2 fractions. One where it's a plus and one where it's a minus. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 plus the square root of 65 over 4. And I'm also going to do 3 minus the square root of 65 over 4. Good? Okay, now let's go to our calculator. We can type this in and get a decimal. Do your fraction bar, alpha y equals enter. Use your sit up, do this, alpha y equals enter. 3 plus the square root of 65 over 4. And hit enter. And we get a decimal. Let's round to the nearest thousandth, which is 3 numbers after the decimal. So I'm going to look at the 4th. Does 5 round things up or keep it the same? Up, so that 5 is going to become a 6. So it's going to be 2.766. Now I need to calculate it where it's a minus. I'm going to show y'all something that some of y'all might know, but some of y'all might not on the calculator. Okay? Especially if I just type in the whole long thing like this. You won't want to type this in the calculator twice, will you? The only thing you're changing is now instead of being a plus, now it's a minus. So if I arrow up, do you see how I'm highlighting? You can't really see on my calculator, but if you arrow up, you should see like a green highlight over this. So on your calculator, you do it. Hit arrow up twice, and I'm wanting to highlight this fraction. If you hit enter then, notice how it comes down here? It's like a copy and paste type function on your calculator. So instead of typing it all in again, I'm just going to arrow over and change that plus to a minus. Do you see how that could save me some time? Okay, did y'all know you could do that? Some of us maybe not. And hit enter. And we get negative 1.26. Does the 5 round us up? Yep, so the 5 becomes a 6. Okay, don't change the page yet. Okay? So, on your homework today, some of them are going to say you can write them as decimals rounded to whatever place it tells you to round. This would be how you do it. Some of them are going to say write your answer in simplified radical form. Okay? What is simplified radical form? You still are going to have a radical sign in your answer. Okay? So we need to look at our 65. Is 65 divisible by any perfect squares? Well, if we don't know, remember you can do this on your calculator. 65 divided by x. And we're going to go to our table. Is it divisible by 4? No. 9? No. 16? No. 25? No. 36? No. 49? No. 64? No. And I can stop there because it's not going to be divisible by a perfect square that's larger than it. So if I have 65, I'm looking for the perfect squares lower than 65. Is it divisible by any perfect squares less than 65? No, so it can't be simplified. So I could also write this as x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 65 over 4. On your homework, it's going to ask for it like this, and it's going to ask for it like this. Okay, this is rounded decimal. This is simplified radical. Okay, we good? Now, on your homework, which we'll go over this section as well, it's going to ask, do you have real solutions or imaginary solutions? Do you have rational solutions or irrational solutions? Do we know the difference between rational and irrational? Okay, irrational means that you have a radical in your answer. So do I have a radical? That could not be simplified, could it? So this would be irrational. Okay? If the number you're taking the square root of isn't a perfect square, bless you, you have irrational solutions. Okay? Meaning they're decimals. Good? And again, we will go over that. Okay, let's do more practice. And we're going to do it slightly different. So I'm going to show you how we can type it just all in the calculator at once. Okay. You're good. Thank you. Did you have a good spring break? Mm-hmm. Good. See you tomorrow. Is this in standard form, guys? No, it doesn't equal 0. So what do I need to do with that -4? Move it over. So I'm going to have negative x squared minus 2x. If it's a negative on the right, how do you move your -4 from the right to the left? Add 4 equals 0. We okay with that? Ah, you can't see. What's A? -1. What's B? -2. And what's C? +4. So we're going to substitute stuff in. -B. What's B? Plus or minus the square root of B. What's B? Squared minus 4A. C. All over 2A. Okay, I'm not going to simplify my square root. I'm going to literally type this in the calculator exactly as I see it, okay? Because I'm going to show you how we can do this. So, do your big fraction bar, alpha y equals n. Let's all do this with me. Again, I am trying to help you and make your life easier. So we're all on our calculator, and we are sitting up, and we are doing alpha y equals n. Actually, I learned this too. Did y'all know that you can just do alpha x? That's the shortcut. Some of y'all knew that, some of you did not. If you just do alpha x, the fraction comes up. So negative parentheses -2. Let's just do the plus this time. Plus the square root parentheses -2 squared minus 4 parentheses -1 parentheses 4. Does this look messy on the calculator? Yes, it is messy, but the calculator is so nice and it gives us an answer. Times 2 times -1. So I put it in exactly as I see it, except for I didn't put the plus minus. You can't do plus minus on the calculator. I am right now doing it just where it's a plus. And hit enter. And when it's a plus, what do I get? Now again, this one more than the last one we did, would you ever want to type that in again? I want it, I'm lazy / efficient. So I'm going to arrow up twice, hit enter. And what's the only thing I need to change? Turn it into a minus. So arrow, go to that plus sign, see how it's highlighted. I'm going to change that to a minus. Make sure you don't change it to a negative. Okay, it's -b plus or minus. So make sure you use a minus. Enter, and I get 1.236. Are we seeing how the quadratic formula isn't too terrible? It's messy, but if you can substitute it in correctly, we get the right answer. Okay? The next one we are going to simplify it. Okay. Okay, now the boxes are gone. Okay, the formula is gone for us, where we just have to fill it in. We're going to have to write it in ourselves. That's okay. Okay, what's my A? Or, sorry, are we in the correct form? ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Yes, what's my A? 4. What's my B? 4. What's my C? -9. Yusra, sit up. I'm going to take your chair away and make you stand the rest of the class if need be. Okay, so our quadratic formula is x equals negative. What's B? plus or minus the square root of b. What's b? Squared. Minus 4 a c. All over 2a. What's a? 4. So this one, instead of just going directly to the calculator, I am going to simplify it piece by piece, because again, there are some questions on your homework where you're going to have it in radical form. If it says radical form, you cannot just type this directly in the calculator, okay? So let's do x equals, what's a negative times 4? Just negative 4, very good. Plus or minus the square root. I'm going to type the part under the radical, though, in the calculator. What's that called, the part under the radical? Starts with the D, the discriminant. Parentheses 4 squared minus 4 parentheses 4 parentheses negative 9. Again, guys, the way to get good practice is when I do it, you do it too. A lot of us struggle on tests and stuff because we don't actually use this time to practice typing stuff into our calculator. Okay, you just wait for me to do it for you. That's not beneficial for you. And we get 160. All over, what's 2 times 4? 8. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to see if the square root of 160 simplifies. First of all, 160 is not a perfect square. You get a decimal. But we can go to y equals and do 160 divided by x. Is it divisible by perfect square? What? Bigger. $16. So I can separate this into, so I'm going to do this kind of over to the side. 160 can become the square root of 16 and the square root of 10. What's the square root of 16? 4. So I can make this 4 square root of 10. Okay, we good with that? So I'm going to rewrite this, but instead of putting the square root of 160, I'm going to put 4 root 10. Okay, so x equals negative 4 plus or minus 4 root 10 over 8. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about simplifying our radicals, or simplifying our fraction when we have radicals. Do we see that this 4 is outside the radical? This 4 is outside the radical. This 8's outside the radical. So I have 2 terms in the numerator and 1 in the denominator. If all 3 terms are divisible by the same thing, we're going to simplify it. Okay? Am I going to look at that 10? No, because the 10's under the radical. You can't simplify something that's inside the square root with something outside. So we're just looking at all the numbers that are outside the square root. So negative 4, 4, and 8. Is there a number that negative 4, positive 4, and 8 are all divisible by? 4. Okay, so what's negative 4 divided by 4? Negative 1. So this is going to be a negative 1. What's 4 divided by 4? 1. And what's 8 divided by 4? 2. So I'm going to have x equals negative 1 plus minus. If I write 1 root 10, do you need the 1 there? No, just like if you have 1x, do you need the 1 there? No, so I'm going to do root 10 over 2. So that would be if it said simplified radical form. Do you see how you're starting out the same exact way, no matter if it says simplified radical form or decimal rounded form or whatever? But your answers are going to look vastly different. Okay? How are we feeling about the quadratic formula? Thumbs. See lots of no thumbs. How do we feel about the quadratic formula? Again, do you have to use the quadratic formula? No. Because, now let's look. Let's go to Desmos. So it's what? Negative 4x squared plus 4x minus 9. Did I do that right? Oh, it's not negative 4x, sorry. There we go. Do I have my 2 decimal points? Could I now, let's write those numbers down. So it's negative 2.081 and 1.081. Okay, those are my 2 decimals. We good with that? Let's go back to our calculator and let's see if that's equivalent to this fraction. Okay? So I'm going to do negative 1 plus the square root of 10 over 2. Does that match one of the decimals I got? Okay, now let's do the minus. Does that match my other decimal? Do you see how you can graph to track? Okay. Do we think we're okay maybe doing one more and then doing homework? Because I do want y'all to have time, a lot of time to do homework, because a lot of us did not do our first 2 homework assignments. Okay. So let's go to number 3. Are we in the correct form? ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. What's my a? What's my b? And what's my c? Excuse me. So we're going to do x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, let's type this all in our calculator, all at once. Negative 5 plus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10 all over 2 times 1. Type it all in your calculator. No. Non-real answers. When you type it in, it says non-real answers. What do you think that means? No real solutions. And let's see why. Okay, 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10. If I type the discriminant in, which is the portion under the radical, you get, if your discriminant is negative, you have no real solutions. Okay, because you can't square root a negative. Could you graph it to check to make sure you did it correctly? X squared plus 5x plus 10. Anytime I say no real solutions, I am definitely graphing to make sure. So anytime I have no real solutions, I am graphing on my calculator to make sure it does not hit the x-axis. So let's all go to y equals on our calculator and do x squared plus 5x plus 10. So on our calculator, let's all go to y equals and type in x squared plus 5x plus 10. Hit graph. Does that parabola ever get low enough to hit the x-axis? No, because there are no real solutions. Okay? Again, use your calculator to help you. We good? Okay.